Well, good day to you. It is May the 7th. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. My name is Gary Willing. I want to welcome you to Search for Signs. And as I always like to do, just kind of point out to those people who are new that if you want to know more about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, if you have a couple questions after listening to this video, you can get your questions answered a couple different ways. Okay, you can post your questions in the comments section. You can email me your question. I love it when people do that because it gives me something to talk about in another video. But if you're not somebody that likes to do that, it is okay. I would say the best way to get your questions answered for yourself, to see if there's any truth to this information for yourself, is to check out some of the links that I provided in the description portion of these videos, such as the Share International site. Link is at the very top because you can get the best background information about what I talk about here there than you can anywhere else. But like I said, if you want to join the discussion, let me know what you think. Post a comment. Post your question in the comments section or email me at searchforsigns@mail.com. Now, I did have a couple comments and a question that came my way, and I wanted to kind of get on into it. Biomirror Infinity 96 commented and said, at least 100 Buddhas available in the world at any given time, but no one would speak up. They would rather silently working in the sphere of consciousness and change the world through generations. You could obviously see the number of young people are having better consciousness and thought process than the old folks. An emerging globalized cosmopolitan worldview is the evidence for that. Information is from a Master Oski Saga, Zen Master from Chennai, South India. Well, thank you very much for the comment. Now, I also want to say, too, I wish we were all in the same room and we could have a discussion. And I'm not just commenting on a comment, because it sounds kind of lopsided when that happens. But we all have our different views on everything, really, but especially when it comes to information like this. I do appreciate comments like this, but I want to comment and talk about something to hopefully help us learn a little bit more about this information. But don't take it as I'm being critical of what you're saying. Just take it as maybe perhaps a different viewpoint, or perhaps even to get us all thinking on it. Does that make sense? So hopefully we're not drawing conclusions based on what I'm saying, based on what you're saying. Because I can see where you're coming from with this. You know, the Ben's Master in several articles referenced the younger generations being more open to the priorities of Maitreya, more open to the problems of the world, more able and capable of solving those problems as a generational group compared to the older generations, for sure, right? So there's a lot of truth to that. Now, in terms of 100 Buddhas available at the world at any given time would really be, to answer that, we would have to look at it from the Ageless Wisdom Teachings point of view of what is a Buddha. A Buddha is a lot like a Christ. It's not something that happens every day. And I don't agree with the statement that this person said that there's 100 Buddhas in the world. We would be living in a totally different world if that was the case. Totally different. Just the presence of a Buddha, just like the presence of the Christ, changes the hearts and minds of the whole world when they're in the world. So it would be quite extraordinary of a time if that was if that was the case. And I hope I'm wrong, but I know, based on the Ageless Wisdom Teachings of Benjamin Creme and Alice Bailey, that's not the case. But it also, at the same time, when people talk about a person like this, or even when they refer to somebody being a master or ascended master, it cheapens what it really means to be a master. Just as I believe, even though the Christians view Jesus as the only true Son of God, there's nobody else in all of cosmos that's as high as Jesus, I think that viewpoint is a myth. And that viewpoint cheapens really who and what the Christ is and who and what Jesus is, to be honest. That's just my take on it. So every time I sit in church and they're singing praises to Jesus and, the blood of Jesus, they talk about the blood of Jesus and all that stuff, I think it cheapens the whole experience of life here on earth. Because that would mean that you'd have to rely on a Savior to save you, when in reality, we have to save ourselves. Jesus is an example of how to live, how to love, how to treat one another, and how to forgive one another, how to live within the laws of cause and effect, and so forth, based on the writings in the Bible. But I don't think belief in and of itself does anything for the person, and it doesn't really do anything for Jesus himself, and it really doesn't express who and what he really was and what he really means for humanity. That's why if you ever go to the Sharon National site and you read the article from Benjamin Crime's master, The Son of Man, and he talks about really what Maitreya's role is with humanity, what he means for humanity, how he even came about. And it's not coming from a higher state of consciousness as the Christians believe Jesus to have done, but to truly come from our own humanity, and not from a higher planet, not from another cosmos, not from another solar system, from our own humanity. Come out of our humanity in the way that he did after experiencing every aspect of human life, all the pain and the trials and tribulations that we are all dealing with. And not every one of us deal with all of the trials and tribulations at one time, right? He did it over many lifetimes. He experienced all the pain and the suffering that any one of us could ever experience. And yet he triumphed, became the first of our humanity to become a master, to truly manifest the soul perfectly. And then to take it a step further and literally embody love, not just manifest it as these masters do, which from our point of view makes them perfect. But from their point of view, they have other things that they can do and improve upon and so forth. And Maitreya is an example for that. He, didn't just become a master and stop. He evolved to a higher state of being where he literally can embody, like I said, the love nature of God. To be a Buddha, it takes a lot of work. It's not something that somebody can just fall into, So I think there's a general misconception of who and what the masters are, who and what the Christ is, who and what the Buddhas are, and it's natural because we don't really know. So that's why when I started out, I wanted to talk about what you say because I think we can learn from it. But I hope I don't come across as being defensive or being critical, because I'm not. We all have to learn this information at some point. We might not believe it at 100% the way that I do, and that's fine. You know what I mean? But according to the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, the path that a master takes, the path that a person takes to become a master is very arduous. That's why there's not very many masters in the world. Eventually there'll be millions of masters, but that's in the future. Maybe at some point there will be a time on this little planet called Earth where we will have 100 Buddhas walking around. But it's not, we wouldn't have that happen and have the world that we have, because it would take a level of consciousness of humanity as a whole, to be able to have that happen. Just as there aren't 100 masters walking around the world right now. There's 49. So, for there to be thousands upon thousands of masters or something like that some people claim is just, to me it cheapens the whole, what it means to be a master. But in the future, eventually every single one of us will be one. And that's the beauty of it. That's why I think the information about Maitreya and what he means for humanity, how he came about in the article, The Son of Man, really speaks to the truth of who and what we all are, which is potential masters. It's not about Maitreya. It's about the evolution of humanity, really, is what it means when we talk about this information. Hopefully that makes sense, but I really do appreciate the comment nonetheless, because it gave me something to really, really think about. All right, let's see. James Wambidi had a comment. He said, I understand Lord Maitreya, the world teacher, visited the BBC in 1986. The BBC gave him a ride to the Queen's Palace. On reaching there, the Queen welcomed him and consulted her bishops. The bishops apparently consulted their Bibles and came to the conclusion that Lord Maitreya was not the Christ they have been waiting for. Maybe the bishops of London expected him to be accompanied with flying angels and spectacular fireworks. I guess I don't remember reading that exactly. I remember reading something to that effect in one of Ben's books where he talked about when Maitreya met the BBC. So I'm not totally up 100% on who he met and what. I don't know if he met the Queen. I know he met some of the bishops, maybe of the Queen, but I'm not sure. So I'm not contradicting what you're saying. I just don't know per se. But it would stand to reason that they would believe that based on their own conditioning. In time, when people will start to trust Maitreya, he's not. I think people, and even people with a Christian background who start to learn about this information, whether it's coming from a fearful perspective or coming from a very hopeful perspective, just based on their background, have a tendency to look to and expect Maitreya to come back as a religious leader. And he's not. He's coming back as a teacher. So it really doesn't matter if the bishops think he is the Christ come back, ever. It doesn't even matter if an ordinary Christian views him as the Christ. He doesn't, the teachings of Maitreya aren't required. You don't have to change your beliefs as a requirement in order to understand what he's saying, apply what he is teaching. In fact, Maitreya would say that you should stay within the framework of your belief. But he just comes as a teacher. I know when I talk about him as the Christ, I know it probably triggers a lot of Christians, but it's not anything that, I think that you would have to change your beliefs to apply, And I'm expecting a lot when I say that to people, but that's truly how he will relate to humanity as just a teacher. Even after the Day of Declaration, even after we all are aware of who he is, he won't really refer to himself as that, because he even said that those are just names that we came up with about who he is. And they're causing confusion, division within the hearts and minds of humanity, when he just sees himself as a teacher. But in reality, he's the teacher in the broadest sense, because he's teaching all of humanity at the same time. You know what I mean? And not just on one specific topic, whether it's physics or math or music or art. He's teaching everything, and how to live as a humanity. How he'll be the perfect example. So not only is he teaching us in his words and his wisdom, but he'll be teaching us with the example that he lives. And all these masters will do that in the same way. So hopefully that helps too, and shed some light on it. But thank you very much for the comment, James. Always appreciate when you comment. Another James. Let's see. The Jameses got it today. They've joined the discussion more than any other name. Do a lot of reading. Read it what exactly, Master? What, read Blavatsky and Bailey's books for background on all this? Maybe I'm stupid, but I find them hard to understand. What if we can't understand what the Theosophists have been saying about this over the last 100 years in their unintelligible writings, Master? Please speak to that. Well, first of all, I don't understand where the hostility is coming toward me. So, unless you're talking about Ben's master, I never refer to myself as a master. So if you're using that in reference to me, that doesn't really do me much service. I actually, James, if you're listening to this, agree wholeheartedly in what you're saying. That HPB's books, I don't even know where those books are anymore, because I didn't get a lot out of them, because I don't really understand what she's saying. They were written for other people, I guess, Alice Bailey I can kind of understand a little bit, but I have to kind of go back and read it again, and even the Master DK said he didn't really write those books for that generation and the next few generations, but for generations hundreds of years from now that will really understand it, but you can still get something from it, but at the same time, it's a lot harder for me to read too. And I would say Benjamin Creme had the best way of explaining HPB's work, Helena Roerich's work, his own master when he would talk about it, and in reference to some of the articles that his master wrote. Even, and this is something that, and in talking about Alice Bailey too, he could explain it it'd be very easy to understand based on what he was saying. He was very adept at that, articulating exactly what they're saying, but also too something that Benjamin Creme did, and you can read about it in Maitreya's Mission Volume 3, where he talks about the artists of the Renaissance period, like Leonardo da Vinci and Rembrandt and Raphael and some of the other master painters, and what their work was, their spiritual work through art, and the way he explains their paintings and how they paint based on the quality of the energy of the person, right? But also some of the inner interpretations of why they were painting what they were painting is very enlightening. So I would say read Ben's work really to understand it, But also too, if you were talking about something that I said, I didn't go back and listen to what I had said in that video, but if I said something about reading more, which I do from time to time, is, James, it's not in reference of reading Alice Bailey books or HPB books. It's reading about the problems in the world, and one of the things that Ben's master said in that article, To Serve Anew, was after Maitreya comes out, a large segment of society will really be looking for more information. I think this was the article that I read, where he was talking about there will be this flood of people wanting information, right? But we'll all look for that information differently. Some people, it will be about the esoteric teachings of Alice Bailey or these masters. That will fascinate the hell out of them, right? Other people won't be interested in it at all. They'll be more interested, and you might find yourself in this other group. You might be more interested in, well, how do we solve the environmental problem, right? Or how do we solve the hunger problem? Or how do we institute the principle of sharing or whatever, right? That might interest you more. When I encourage everyone to read these websites, it's more for the background information about Maitreya, but there are other websites in there that talk about the priorities of Maitreya, but you don't even have to go to those websites. You can look at it in other areas, right? I know Greta Thunberg, which she triggers a lot of people, but she's very passionate about the environment. You got to give it to her. She even said, when somebody says, well, what do I do how do I help the environment? She said, the first thing you should do is educate yourself on the problem. And that's all I was saying, is educate yourself on the problems of the world. If you feel like that's what you need to do. If you feel like you need to read Alice Bailey, then read Alice Bailey. I'm not telling you what to read. I'm just encouraging myself and everybody to read more about this information. He was talking to or about people who are interested in the esoteric teachings of, let's say, Alice Bailey or Benjamin Creme or something like this, so they could explain it better to people who don't know anything about this information. Because there will be an interest on an unprecedented scale for that information once Maitreya comes out and rocks everybody's world on the day of declaration. They'll be like, what just happened? There will also, I think, be a tremendous group of people who will be very fearful after experiencing this this once in a planetary lifetime miracle of a global Pentecost on the day of declaration. Feeling the love of the Christ, enfold them. Like he said, it would be like he gives humanity a hug, or he embraces all of humanity. I think is how he put it. Even after all that, people will eventually revert back to their conditioning, revert back to their fear. Was that AI? Was that a computer-generated thing? Is that the deep state or the Illuminati that did? There'll be all sorts of rumors and conjectures online. You know how people think, right? And the fear that they conjure up and they start to spread it just willy-nilly, not realizing what they're doing or what they're saying. And even then, after all that, if you kind of read some of this stuff, you might be able to, in the future, just saying, just as a form of world service for people, you might be able to, quell some of the fears in people, because you say, no, it wasn't that. It was that, it was the love nature of the Christ that did that. It's funny. I'll tell you a little story, that I think that could happen. When Ben came to Atlanta in 97, when I started with the group here in Atlanta in the mid 90s, a couple years after that, I was contacted by somebody in Share International. Would you guys be interested in bringing Benjamin Creme to give a lecture? And he said, of course, yeah. So he came in 97, he came in 98. And I remember this was in 97. This was the first year that he came. He had been to Atlanta in the 80s, but this was the first year he came, when I was there. And we put on this lecture, and it was it was in a banquet room at a health and fitness mall in Gwinnett County, just north of Atlanta. And it was a pretty simple, venue, and I'm a musician. I had asked a musical friend of mine if we could rent his PA and his speakers for this and the recording equipment for when Ben came here. So I picked up all the equipment from my band friend and took it there and set it all up. So I was in charge of the sound, but I was also in charge of the lights. Okay. Now the lights was a light switch. It wasn't anything super spectacular. It was a light switch that turned off the fluorescent overhead lighting in the room. Okay, this is a true story. And when I was discussing the lecture with Ben, kind of beforehand, he said, okay, so during the lecture, obviously had the lights on. He goes, but when I give the blessing, I would like half the lights turned off. And I kind of went through the ones that he wanted. He goes, okay, that's perfect, right? So I knew how many lights in the room he wanted off, and I think I even put some tape by it so I knew exactly which ones to turn off, and it wasn't, I didn't turn off too many, and I didn't leave too many on, right? So I'm sitting in there in their chair, Ben's giving his talk, and he answers all the questions, and then he gives the blessing at the very end. And so I went, and he kind of gave me the nod to turn the lights off, and I leaned back in my chair, and I turned the two lights off, and Maitreya overshadowed him at that time, and gave the blessing out to the group, to the audience. And as he does it, he's looking at all these, he looks at everybody. Maitreya overshadows him, and it's Maitreya looking through Ben to each individual person. And he gives a blessing to the whole group, but he also gives a blessing to each individual, and he sometimes sends healings to people and all that kind of stuff. Well, there's this one guy, I don't remember the guy's name, but he had a website, and this was back when the internet was just getting started. So there's no way for me to find this website now, I don't think. But anyway, he had a website that was information about Maitreya being the Antichrist. That was his view. And he went there, and he was kind of like an undercover spy in this lecture. And I remember seeing him, because at the beginning of the lecture, he walked right past me and glared at me as I smiled and said good evening to him. And he kind of just glared. He didn't say hello, just glared at me. He went and sat down almost right in the front. And didn't disrupt the proceedings, didn't disrupt the lecture. During the blessing, like I said, all I did was I turned the lights down. Well, apparently, he wrote this, a few days later on his website, he wrote about his experience at this talk. And he saw this golden light around Ben. And he was convinced that we had this very intricate lighting system in the ceiling to fool people. And had he talked to me and asked what the lighting system was that created this effect, I could have shown him. It was just me leaning back in the chair and turning the lights off in this banquet hall. That was it. But he was convinced that we had tens of thousands of dollars maybe to set up this intricate thing to fool people. Even though he had this wonderful experience, really, and I didn't see this golden light around Ben, this guy did. But yet he reverted back to his fear after it had all happened. So I think that could also happen too. So I said all that to say, what I'm saying? After the day of the declaration, there'll be several, people will they'll walk, as Ben's master said, for a time. Inwardly, they'll be looking at what happened. And then eventually we have to kind of get back to it. For the majority of people, they'll kind of go back to their everyday life. But for those people who are very interested in service, well, it will inspire them to serve humanity in a way that they had never done before. But there will be people that will go back to being very fearful and stuff like this. So maybe if you read maybe some of Benjamin Creme's books, or go to his website, if you don't want to actually purchase his books, you can be of help to people in the future. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there too. We're just spitballing here. You do what you do, you know what I mean? However you want to do it. Does that make sense? So hopefully that helps. I love you guys. You guys take care. Enjoy the day. And I look forward to putting up videos in the very near future. Have a wonderful day. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.